Alright, hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Today I'm going to be walking you through my pick for the best fighter build in Baldur's Gate. This is intended to be a solid, basic guide for Lae'zel or a main character as a fighter, and we will be focusing on building a solid and simple-to-use build without using any particularly wild tricks, just making the best use of the character and optimizing the build to make sure that you have the tools that it takes for your fighter to excel, either in a party or solo, but this is more intended as a build for a party. To begin with, of course, the first thing that we have to do is fix Lae'zel's stats, because, like all of the companion characters, she comes with a poor stat spread. The Use Recommended button here, I don't recommend using it because it gives you 3 odd numbers, and so you are going to want to change that so that you only have even numbers in your stats, because that's where you get bonuses. So, like with most martial characters, the right stat spread is going to be 16, 14, and then 16, making sure that you have 16s in Strength and Constitution, and then you put your remaining points into Wisdom because it's the most important saving throw of the other 3, although if you are a main character, you might wish to move some of those points into Charisma in order to have better conversation skills. Even though we intend to be in heavy armor, I still highly recommend having the high dexterity because initiative is so important in Dungeons & Dragons, and in Baldur's Gate 3, small bonuses to initiative are enormous. Unlike in tabletop Dungeons & Dragons, where initiative is rolled as roll a d20 and add your initiative score, in Baldur's Gate it's roll a d4 and add your initiative score, which means that bonuses to initiative are 5 times as valuable as normal in Dungeons & Dragons, so it's very important to have high dexterity to ensure that you go first. Since this is going to be a high damage output build, going first will let us take out an enemy before they even get a turn. The other choice that we have to make, of course, if you are not playing this for Lae'zel, is what race you are going with and what background you're going with. For a fighter, the best races are Githyanki is actually one of them, because the bonus mobility options from Githyanki are incredibly powerful, so even though the weapon and armor proficiencies are wasted on you, since fighters get all weapon and armor proficiencies as part of their class, the additional mobility from Enhanced Leap and from Misty Step are extremely powerful, so Githyanki is one of the best options. Wood Elf is, of course, always excellent because of the bonus move speed, and on melee characters, Dwergar can be good because the Enrage is very Enlarge, excuse me, is very powerful as well. So those are my top 3 choices for race here, but of course Lae'zel is a Gith, so that's what we're going with for her. For our fighting style, we are going to pick Great Weapon Fighting, both because it is probably the most powerful of these options if you intend to do damage output, and also because Lae'zel has a number of unique great weapons that are, I guess, not unique to her, but exclusive to Githyanki, and those items are so powerful that it's worth building a character who can make good use of them. For a main character, if you wanted to do Sword and Shield, that's also totally viable, and you could pick either defense or protection here. I would steer away from dueling or two-weapon fighting for this version of the fighter, although those also do have some uses elsewhere, but of course for Lae'zel, we're going to go with Great Weapon Fighting. Finally, for our skill selection, the only really important one is that you need athletics. This is incredibly useful to the fighter because one of the things that they get, of course, is high strength, and being able to reposition enemies is always super powerful. I would, for Lae'zel, recommend putting your other 2 points into Perception and Survival, and then using her Githyanki Astral Knowledge to gain all of the Dexterity skills, which will give you Acrobatics, Sleight of Hand, and Stealth. Those give you a significant boost to your out-of-combat utility and allow her to also be your lockpicking character with 14 dexterity and sleight of hand proficiency. She'll be okay at it, which means that you won't necessarily need to bring a Starian in your party or have lockpicking elsewhere. Always nice to get that kind of incidentally rather than having to build a character specifically for it. So this is my recommended stat spread for Lae'zel. Let's keep on going. So one thing that's kind of interesting about fighters in Baldur's Gate, as opposed to tabletop D&D, is that typically in Dungeons & Dragons, martial characters, like fighters, benefit very strongly from multiclassing, because their abilities are quite front-loaded, and they tend not to gain more stuff as they go down the line. But in Baldur's Gate, because you stop at level 12, and fighters get maybe the best feature in the game at level 11, you actually have a pretty strong incentive to stay single-class fighter all the way through, or almost all the way through. That being said, Fighter is also one of the best 2-level dips because of this ability that we get at level 2, Action Surge. This gives you a whole extra action, which, once you combine that with extra attack from hitting level 5, means that you can make 4 attacks in a turn. Obviously, that's incredibly powerful. But we don't have any decisions to make at this point, so let's keep leveling up. Our first major decision is what subclass we're going to pick. I've already showed an Eldritch Knight build, so if you're interested in that one, there is one on the channel. Go check that out. But for a fighter who intends to be primarily a fighter, I think the best build, uncontestedly, is Battlemaster. Battlemaster has a number of extremely powerful effects that we can use to really amp up the ability of the fighter. You get these superiority dice, and you have 4 every short rest, which means you can use 12 of them in a day, 16 if you have a bard, and get a 3rd short rest, which is very powerful. It means that fighters have some of the best sustained resource output in the game. Only warlocks come close to being able to just do as much in a day as a fighter can. I guess warlocks actually slightly exceed fighters because they're also on short rests, and Eldritch Blast is so powerful, but fighters are, in terms of how much they can get accomplished in between long rests, one of the best classes in the game. Battlemaster fighters in particular excel at this because of these maneuvers, which allow you to perform powerful actions in combat. There's a lot of maneuvers, but we need to pick the best ones for us. So, of the 3 that you start with, I am of the strong opinion that 2 that you absolutely have to take first are Precision Attack and Riposte. Precision Attack allows you to spend a superiority die to add a d8 to your attack roll. That's an average bonus of 4.5. Most of the time, that's going to mean that you hit on pretty much every time you make that attack with a precision attack. This also will come up next level due to a feat that we're taking, because it counteracts the downsides of any penalties that you take to hit extremely well. Riposte gives you something to do with your reaction, which is really important to this character as well, because fighters, one issue that they have as a character is that they don't get to use their reaction very effectively by default. Riposte fixes that. Enemies will miss you frequently because you have high AC, and that gives you the option to spend a superiority die to hit them back for additional bonus damage. For our 3rd pick, I'm going to go with Trip Attack. You definitely want one of the ones that lets you spend a die to add damage, because you can use that in combination with Precision Attack to guaranteed hit for a lot of damage, and Trip Attack has the additional benefit of knocking the target prone, which gives any subsequent melee attacks you make in that round advantage. So, for example, you can Trip Attack, even at level 3, you can trip an enemy, Action Surge, and then hit them with advantage. You use Precision Attack on the first one to guarantee that the trip hits, and then you get a more or less guaranteed hit from the advantage attack for your second attack. This means that you're extremely reliable at dealing damage. So these are the 3 that I would pick. There's a couple others that are also good, and you can swap the order of these around, but I highly recommend going with these for the first. We'll talk about the other good ones as we go on. At level 4, you have another major decision to make, because you get access to a feat. Fighters get more feats than any other character, and so and also have access to more useful feats, as in more of the feats on this list are good for fighters than typically for most characters. So you are going to want to make quite a bit of use of this feat list to amp up your character. There are 2 feats other than ability improvement that are particularly worth noting on this character to start with. And those 2 feats are Great Weapon Master, which adds 10 damage to your attacks at the cost of a -5. But we took Precision Attack and Tripping Attack, meaning that you can very reliably, even through the disadvantage, land these Great Weapon Master hits, which will increase your damage output massively. We'll be making a lot of attacks in a turn, and so Great Weapon Master will also have a fairly high chance to trigger its bonus action additional attack. This is also good because, as I mentioned, fighters don't, by default, have a lot of uses for their bonus actions or reactions, and so adding Great Weapon Master, giving you potential use for your bonus action on a turn, is extremely powerful. The other option, of course, is just to take an ability improvement at level 4, and the final option that's very good, especially in a party, is Sentinel. This gives you an alternate use for your reaction, and now between Riposte and Sentinel, you have two reactions whether an enemy attacks you or attacks an ally. Also, preventing enemies from moving and keeping them inside of damaging AoE effects, keeping them away from your ranged allies, is extremely powerful, so Sentinel is very good in a party. But for this build, which is primarily focused on damage output, I recommend starting with Great Weapon Master. You mitigate the downsides of Great Weapon Master with your precision attack and the advantage from trip attack, and it will vastly increase your damage output, especially starting next level, when we get access to extra attack. For us, giving you a second attack with each action that you make an attack with, this also doubles the number of attacks you get from Action Surge, is obviously extremely powerful. This is going to double your damage output, and it multiplies the Great Weapon Master damage as well, because you're adding 10 on each of those attacks additionally. This also, at level 5 for Lae'zel or a main character Githyanki, gets you access to Misty Step, which is excellent. Any repositioning tool on a fighter is super powerful, so keep an eye out for those in your items. There's a couple items that also give you a bonus action Misty Step once per day, and those are all extremely good for fighters. Let me show you one of those actually now. An item to keep an eye out for is the Disintegrating Nightwalkers here, which give you Misty Step once per day, and also prevent you from being enwebbed, entangled, ensnared, or slipping, which is incredibly strong. So that makes you immune to surfaces and gives you Misty Step once per day. Very powerful boots. You get them in the Underdark in Act 1. At level 6, because we're a fighter, we get a second feat. So most characters will have to wait till level 8 or longer if they multi-class, but because we're a single-class fighter, we get to get a second feat. For this one, I would recommend just taking your ability improvement at this point. We do want to hit 20 strength, and while we took a detour for Great Weapon Master, it's very important that we hit 20 strength. I will also talk about a second version of this build where we get more feats, because we are going to use an item to give ourselves bonus strength, so we won't have to spend feats on it. But if you are not doing that, then you definitely want to increase your strength, because 20 strength is really important. It increases your damage output and your hit chance, which, since we will be taking penalties on our attacks, our hit chance is really important. Level 7, we get to add 2 maneuvers, and I think that the two best ones to add here are Disarming Strike, which can be very useful if an enemy has a weapon that either you want to steal or that is very powerful. Some, especially boss enemies, will have very powerful unique weapons that getting those away from them is extremely valuable and can really make certain fights much easier. And the other one that I like is Menacing Attack, although I would also say that Pushing Attack or Goading Attack can be very good, but Menacing Attack I like in particular because you can use it with a ranged weapon to prevent an enemy from closing the distance to you. So if you frighten an enemy, they can't move, and that means that you can use this with a ranged weapon, which you are a fighter and have full access to all the ranged weapons in the game. Do remember that you can make ranged attacks on this build, no problem, especially from high ground and stuff. Your hit chance won't be at all bad with 14 dexterity, and you can even use precision attack on those if you need to, but in particular, frightening an enemy and preventing them from closing the distance with your squishy allies can be extremely useful if you can't get this character into melee in time. So those are the maneuvers that I recommend. At level 8, we are just going to continue to increase our strength. That's very important. And then at level 9, we get access to Indomitable. This is an extremely powerful ability, especially because as a fighter you have Constitution saving throws. Anything that makes you roll a Constitution save is usually quite... you are proficient in Constitution saving throws. Anything that makes you roll a Constitution save is going to be pretty debilitating. Some of the worst conditions in the game, like Nauseated, which prevents you from doing anything, have Constitution saves. So Indomitable not only makes your weak saves better, it also makes your strong saves very unlikely to fail, and that's incredibly powerful. One of the best class features in the game here. Level 10, we get 2 more maneuvers, and also the superiority die increases from a d8 to a d10. That means your precision attacks are more likely to hit. At a d10, you have an average of 5.5 on that roll, which means it more than mitigates the downsides of Great Weapon Master, and also add an average of 5.5 damage to every attack you make with your precision attack activated. For our other maneuvers, at this point it's a little less important, but I would take maybe pushing attack, and I actually kind of like feinting attack. At this point, we do have now more uses for our bonus actions, but sometimes you just really need an attack to hit, and so you can say, all right, I'm going to use my bonus action plus precision attack to make a feinting precision attack and just guarantee that we hit with advantage and the additional bonuses. Something to keep in mind about Great Weapon Master is that the way that the math works out, it is almost never correct to turn it off. You will do more average damage almost always by leaving it on all the time and accepting the penalty, and then you mitigate the to hit with by knocking the enemies prone, by using precision attack, by gaining advantage from other ways, such as by hiding and sneaking up behind them before bonking them. There's a lot of ways you can mitigate the to-hit penalty, and even without those, the math is a little complicated, but the average damage per round is almost always higher using Great Weapon Master than not using Great Weapon Master. So don't be afraid to just leave it on. It will feel bad sometimes when you miss, but most of the time you're going to do more damage on average with it on. Finally, at level 11, we get the other reason we stayed in Fighter for so long, improved extra attack, which gives you 3 attacks per action in combination with Action Surge. That's 6 attacks. If they crit, you get if any of those crit, you get an additional attack thanks to Great Weapon Master, and that's incredibly powerful. This is obviously one of the best feats in the game. It makes a Great Weapon Fighter the highest damage output character, just in terms of raw damage output, because this is so powerful doing this many attacks in a round, other than some very specific multi-class combinations with, usually with Warlock can get slightly higher damage, but you get to do it with lots of HP and in heavy armor and everything as well. So this is one of the best, most solid builds in the game, is just taking Fighter all the way through. Finally, at level 12, we do have something of a choice. There are 3 options here. You can either just take another level of Fighter and take another feat. My preference, if you're taking another feat, if you are in a party, you should take Sentinel. It's just very valuable. And if you are not in a party, you should take Alert, because, like we talked about, Initiative is just so valuable on any character, but in particular on solo characters, you need to win Initiative all the time. So if you're playing solo, you may want to move Alert to like level 6 and wait to hit 20 strength at this point. But also if you're playing solo, you'll probably use the second version of this build, which I'll show you in a second, which uses an item to get strength rather than feats. The other option, if we didn't feel like we needed Sentinel, there are 2 other classes that have very strong 1-level dips for us that we could consider taking. One of these is Barbarian. Barbarian will give you access to Rage, which allows you to just gain some additional damage, and while you can't use it in heavy armor, it does give you 2 extra damage per attack. When you're making 6 attacks per round, this is incredibly valuable. The other class feature, unarmored defense, won't come up because you'll still be better off in medium armor, but the bonus damage from rage can still be very useful. The other option, if you want a slightly more defensive option, is Cleric, in particular for the light domain Cleric, because the light domain Cleric gives you access to Warding Flare. This is a reaction that can be used an unlimited number of times per day and causes an enemy's attack to have disadvantage against you. Unfortunately, you can't use it and then to force an attack to miss and then riposte that attack, but you do get one of the best defensive tools in the game. This is going to average it. The math works out to it being about -4.5 on their roll on most common rolls that they would need to make. So if they need to roll between a 6 and a 14 to hit you, then it averages out to -4.5 on their roll. And if they need to roll sort of at the more extreme ends, it's less impactful, but the way the math works out, you should think of it as being about -4.5. So it's basically a shield that you don't have to spend a resource on, and that's incredibly powerful and will keep you alive. My personal preference in this case is to go for just the 12th level of Fighter and take your last feat. I think the feat is slightly better, but Warding Flare is the best option if you are finding yourself needing some more defense. And you do get a couple spells and things like that, which can be quite useful as well. Cantrips, obviously, can help, like having just light is very useful, and having the ability to bless yourself before going into combat. You won't lose concentration very often because you have Indomitable and Constitution, 16 Constitution, and Constitution save proficiency, so blessing yourself is extremely valuable. You will definitely want to be getting this from somewhere, so I would recommend getting Bless and Healing Word as your two spells if you are going the Cleric route. Alright, so let me also just quickly reset, and I will show you what we will do if you want to make use of this item. In Act 1, there is a vendor, Auntie Ethel will sell you 3 of these every day, so you can stock up on Elixirs of Hill Giant Strength for the entire game and just drink one every day, meaning that your strength will always be 21. Given that, you won't have to put any attribute points into strength in character creation or into strength in your level ups, which frees us up to take a lot more feats. So I'll just quickly run through that and talk about which feats we want at each level if we're using elixirs rather than using our strength, rather than actually using strength. So let's do that. Our attribute split, of course, is going to change because we are not taking any strength in our character. If you were doing this, you'll probably want to build the character the way I showed you in the first build, and then respec it into into this version of the character later on. You can do. My advice would be to do this split with our additional 5 points here. You can then go to 14 wisdom and then like 10 charisma, something like that. And the reason for this is that then you can use Auntie Ethel's deal to get to 18 constitution as well. Or you could just take even numbers and just boost your other stats appropriately, something like this. But getting to 17 constitution will allow you to use Auntie Ethel's deal to get to 18 constitution, which of course increases your HP significantly, so that's probably the most powerful build if you just want to strictly optimize this character. Other than that, all the other decisions that we're making are going to be the same. So we're just going to speed through this level up process, but I'll just show you which feats we'll take it at each level. Take the same maneuvers. And I would recommend still starting with Great Weapon Master. You'll have 20 strength already, so you're very likely to hit. We definitely want to work Sentinel into the build, although if you are not in a party, you would probably prefer Alert. The other options here are Savage Attacker is decent, although since you'll very often be using a greatsword, it has less impact than it would with another weapon because you have the great weapon fighting style, so you're already re-rolling those dice. So what you probably want is to take Sentinel, pick whatever, and here you may wish to take Mobile. Mobile is really good because increasing your movement speed is super powerful. And then also being able to disengage from combat can be very useful. Normally you're going to want to stick to enemies in combat and not have them get away from you, but just increasing your movement speed with mobile is really good. And another one that I liked a lot, if you happen to have a good glaive or halberd, is Polearm Master, because the bonus action attack is really good, and making an opportunity attack when a target comes in range, especially if you are playing the game solo, is a great use of your reaction. In combination with Sentinel, when they come in range of you, they get hit, and then they can't leave range of you that turn, which is very powerful as well. So you might consider this. And at level 12, you are more likely to want to take the Cleric dip in this version of the build because you already have all the most valuable feats. But if you really just want to max out on fighter power, then the best option is probably Mobile here. Other options, you could take Tough if you feel like you need a little more HP. Like at this point, it's going to depend a lot on what you're feeling like your character needs. I would stay away from Charger because these are actions rather than attack actions, so you can't do the charges and then make an attack in the same turn, so they're less powerful than it looks like it would be. Heavy Armor Master I would avoid as well because we're already getting strength, so the strength point is wasted, but you can stack up quite a lot of damage reduction with this. So if you have a suit of armor that gives you high damage reduction, the more damage reduction you stack, the better each point of it is. So it's very possible that that's the best pick for you in that case if you want to try to be more defensive. Alright, so this has been a pretty detailed look at the fighter and my pick for the best fighter, the Battlemaster fighter. So I hope that you have found this useful and have enjoyed this video. If you have, of course, feel free to leave a like, comment on the video, and you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game content. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.